Hello and welcome to another episode of Material Matters with Grant Gibson. I've done more than 100 shows now. However, for listeners who might be new to all this, the idea is I speak to a designer, maker, artist or architect about a material or technique with which they're intrinsically linked and discover how it changed their lives and careers. My guest today is award-winning social entrepreneur Bas van Abel. In 2013, Bas founded Fairphone, a company that is attempting to transform the way our smartphones are manufactured by reducing e-waste, sourcing conflict-free minerals, and creating a product that consumers are encouraged to keep longer and which, importantly, they can repair themselves. It was an immediate hit, attracting 25,000 orders when it launched its first phone via a crowdfunding campaign. It's now sold over 500,000 phones and employs 150 staff. In 2018, Bas stepped back as CEO of the company, although he remains a non-executive board member, and subsequently founded the Clique, a circular startup that looks at ways of dealing with food waste. He's also author of Open Design Now. Bas, thank you very much for doing this.
Lovely to be here, yeah.
We're on Zoom, so it would be good to know where you are right now.
I'm in Utrecht, which is my hometown. I live here. I'm in my own apartment. Apart from working, Fairphone is in Amsterdam. The Clique is in Utrecht. You just mentioned it.
Yeah.
So I have, it's really nice. I have this local business around the corner, and I commute to Amsterdam once in a while to see what's happening there.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about Fairphone largely in this interview. And you're the founder of this fascinating company, but you're no longer CEO. You stepped away in, 6 years ago, 2018.
Yeah.
So what is your role in the company now?
Yeah, so I'm still in the board. As a founder, you're always connected to the company you founded, obviously. But I'm still also actively involved. That doesn't mean that I'm actively involved in the operations of the company, but more on a strategic level and a non-executive level, which means also that we're in close contact with the current executive board, and as a supervisor, you get to see all the stuff that's happening, but from a distance, which is nice because it's also it's a tough company. We're doing it's a tough job. It's fantastic, but it's also it's been quite a journey. The exhaustion at some point also kicks in, and right now I really get to enjoy the good things as well, without knowing that the company's on fire while I'm on stage telling a nice story about the successes. So that kind of dilemma I don't have anymore.
Is it a curious sensation letting other people run your baby?
Oh yeah, no, it's fantastic. I love it. From the moment I stepped back, and like I said, it was quite a journey, and it was apart from me not being the guy that is is the best fit for scaling a company. We're running a company at 20 million turnover, around 100 people. Yeah, most of the focus was on operations and processes and really making a good phone up to the point of customer support, everything, right? So it's not just the phone and the product and the design and the manufacturing. It's also having everything in place to support all those customers. And with that focus, I'm an innovator. I'm a creative. I like new things. I look into the future, and that's where my passion is. I always say I'm good at selling stuff that's not there yet. And what Fairphone needed is to sell the phones that we were making and make them in a really, really good way.
We might talk a bit about that shortly, I think.
So to cut a long story short, for me was a step that I needed to take, which was good for both the company and for me. And I love that I still have the opportunity to be involved, but more from a distance.
So what does a typical day look like for you now?
So with Fairphone, there's quite some things that I'm still involved in terms of management, in terms of shareholders. We just did an investment round last year of attracting another 50 million, also with growth money. And you need plans for that as well. I think a lot of the focus of the company currently is on how to get that brand message to a wider audience. And that also means that you have to look at the brand and how to maybe change a bit the attraction of it to that bigger audience, and without losing the existing audience. And I think one of those things that I do get passionate about is that story of Fairphone. And I think that storytelling is still what I see I can really contribute to. So for me, that is part of what I'm still doing at Fairphone, apart from also the organizational stuff and advisory and stuff that you deal with when you're in a supervisory position. So that's part of what I'm doing. And apart from that, I just joined the board of my former art school, which I really love. I went into business not having a business background, right? I'm an engineer. I've done art school. I've done engineering, but never, was really in a business or an organization or running an organization. I think that the closest I got to running like a team was my intern before I started Fairphone. So, it was quite a big step. And I, after having had that journey and all the experiences of setting up an organization in a commercial context, I also see that I'm really looking also for that artistic thinking that happens basically before something gets into a business model or has to be put into a business model, and that I get at art school. I love the thinking in art schools and the big thinking and anything is possible, and also the creativity. And I do think also that art and culture, art has, is part of culture. And I think it's an important part of what needs to happen as well in terms of changes is in the way we look at the world, even on sustainability and on these levels. I think art has a big role into storytelling and making us think differently about our role in society in order to basically save ourselves, because that's the point where we are.
Listening to you, I'm intrigued because I saw you speak at the Design Council's Design for Planet conference in Norwich last year. Had you been to Norwich before?
No, never. No, I love it.
Norwich is new to you.
Yeah, it was a lovely time, yeah.
Where I thought you were excellent. But I've read since that you're terrified of public speaking. So is a situation like this making you nervous? You don't seem nervous.
Being on stage, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've always had a very ambiguous relationship with being on stage. I do have stage fright, yeah, I still have it, but I love it. And I think what I love about it is you're able to tell a story and what you're passionate about. I wouldn't be able to stand there and tell a story about, another product that is going to hit the market and needs to make success and, purely from a commercial perspective. I get passionate about the things I do, and I see that more and more I start sharing that. That does inspire people. I never thought that I'd reach that point in life where I'd be an inspiration to people on stage. But yeah, it took away also part of the stage fright that I have, but I still feel stressed when I go on stage. But I think it's also, it's became more and more a healthy kind of stress than...
A healthy stress.
Yeah, than staying awake for, a couple of days before going on stage. But no, for now it's, I think I really like telling the story, especially about Fairphone, and get people to also think differently about business, because that's basically what I found out setting up a company from a design perspective, that business is also something you can design and think about, and as designers we can have an influence on how businesses are created as well.
And is it true, before you founded Fairphone, that you didn't actually own a mobile phone?
No, I didn't. No. Yeah. Well, yes, it's true. Yeah. No, I didn't own a phone. I didn't care a lot about phones, to be honest. But I love technology and what it can bring. But I think I was a bit afraid to be too connected at the time and to have like everybody bothering me all the time. And I didn't miss it as well until the moment that they started tearing down the phone booths. And then I had a problem because I also have 3 kids, right? Because, getting in touch with your kids or emergencies and these kind of things, I had to ask people in the train, can I use your phone? And that became, a bit of a problem. And that was at the time I was actually, I think we already started the company. And the first phone I had in my hand was the first even mobile phone I used was the Fairphone 1, but I didn't put a SIM card in. I just used it for, as a music player and some other stuff. And then Fairphone 2, I really, also having, running a company like that. And, I had to, take that step.
So eventually Fairphone 2, the second version you actually used as a mobile phone.
That was the first phone I used as a mobile phone, yes.
This is good to know. I mean, can we talk about the anatomy of a typical mobile phone? Because they're quite mysterious things, aren't they? What are they made of, Bas? I mean, how are they manufactured? Because obviously you identified problems that Fairphone sets out to solve.
Yes, I'd like to look at the world through the eyes of a phone to answer that question, right?
Okay.
If you just look at how a phone is made, and I think as a designer, for me, that is one of the most magical, also intriguing parts of production systems, is that everything basically, comes from the ground. And it all starts in a mine, either in Congo or Chile, Uganda, China, all these minerals. And there's more than 60 minerals going into a phone. And all these minerals are going to be part of components. And these components, after these minerals go into the refineries, and these components are being made by hundreds and hundreds of factories. And then in one factory, the assembly factory, which is the factory that puts everything together, you can imagine over 1,000 of these components come together and they make a phone out of that. And then you have all the software that comes with it, that whole ecosystem of software and apps and making sure that that works well with the phone. And then that phone gets shipped to us in a nice shiny box. When you have it in your hand, and that's, I think, the nice paradox, is like we have this really strong relationship with our phone, but it is a black box. And what fascinates me is that we are able to make something as complex as a phone by working together behind the scenes in a way that people are not even aware, sometimes not aware that they're contributing to this very complex product. But we won't be able to make a phone as an individual. We have to work together, and that economic system makes that happen. But the fact that we have that black box and have no idea what's happening behind the scene, first because of the complexity, second because we've hidden technology also for people because it's scary. I think that really makes me interested in also the question, like you said, how our phone's made and what goes into it. And then I'm not even talking about what kind of problems that are connected to that.
What are the problems that are connected to that?
The big problems and that's, I'm giving you the picture of how the complexity of a phone, because it's hundreds of factories involved, hundreds and hundreds, and all these minerals. So you're basically talking about the whole world being involved into making a phone. If you look at how economic systems work, is they look for cheap labor, and cheap labor in countries which are, with upcoming economies, a lot of, the local and global problems are connected to that. It's it's fair pricing, it's working conditions. So you can imagine, for example, in the mines in Congo, you have conflicts related to the mining of these minerals. That means, same as blood diamonds, some people might have heard of, is that people make money from selling these minerals that we use for our mobile phones and other electronics in a conflict situation. So basically it's fueling that conflict. And that is just one of the problems. You also have a lot of child labor. For example, cobalt is a mineral being used for your battery. And it's also one of the minerals that fuels our energy transition, because, even in electric vehicles and, a lot of things that we need for renewable energy, we need to store that energy. It goes into batteries, and those batteries need these minerals. And the minerals, like cobalt, more than 40% is being mined in Congo or comes from Congo. And there's still 250,000 people that go into the ground with a shovel and no protection, of which tens of thousands of children also connected to that. There have been lawsuits to big companies like Google, Apple, Tesla on having child labor in the supply chain. And you can imagine it's very complex also for these companies to see what's happening, because they are not the ones buying the stuff in these countries, but it is part of your supply chain. And that is on the mineral level, and that goes not only Congo, but also Chile on copper. There's a lot of stuff going on there, Peru. But then if you go into the factories, there's also problems there where with working conditions, ridiculous overtime, low pay, not having a living wage, but a minimum wage which people can't live from. Yeah, one of the biggest problems, I think, also is the way that phones have been designed. So this is all on the labor side and social, environmental elements in the production. But if you look at the design of a phone, it's designed in such a way that it's very, very hard to repair. You can't even change a battery yourself. It's very expensive to have it changed. With the result that people use only their phones for 2 years, and then
2.5 years seems to be the average.
Yeah. So you can imagine you use your phone for 2.5 years. You have a crack in your screen already. It's very expensive to replace the screen. So you don't do that. Your battery is running down, because the lifetime of a battery just is not forever. So the capacity goes down after a while. And then, you get your new subscription from an operator or a carrier, and they offer you a new shiny model with that. And the step is very easily made to toss that phone in the drawer with the rest of all the other phones that you have in your drawer.
And this phone is full of expensive minerals. You've used cobalt, but gold, all sorts of things.
Exactly. And only 15% of those phones get recycled for their minerals. And it's connected also to the way we design phones, even, because if you can extend, it's very simple calculation. If you can extend the lifetime of a phone with twice as long, you only need to produce half the amount of phones, you need half the amount of minerals. So it's not even the recycling that is, I think, the biggest issue. The biggest issue is the speed in which we change our products.
Well, you've described recycling as stupid. in the past?
It is stupid. It is.
Explain. Why is it stupid?
It's the last resort. It's like the last resort of doing something valuable still, which is, if you think about it, it's basically waste management, right? Recycling. So after you've used everything for the longest of the longest, then recycling is probably the best option. But the process of recycling is just taking all this beautiful stuff we've created, like all these mini like capacitors and batteries and screens and all this stuff that the phone is made out of, and all the energy and work that went into it, because most of the work and most of the carbon footprint of a phone is in the production, not in the use. So the harm is already done when that phone is in your hand. And what do? You take that phone and toss it in the oven to get some minerals out of that. That is recycling. So that is kind of stupid when you think about it, if you also have the alternative, which is using a phone longer. So I'm not saying that recycling itself is a stupid exercise, but the way and the speed we use recycling as the solution to all our problems, that I find a bit stupid, because it's just, we should focus on another matter, and that is use products as long as possible, consume less. And the problem with that is consuming less or using less products because you don't eat a phone. I always have a problem with consuming phones. If you use your products longer, it's also a challenge for your business. And I think that is where the real economic element comes in, where there's a design flaw. It's not just, you can't solve that part with just designing a phone that lasts longer, because businesses keep pushing those phones into the market.
Can we talk about, before we get into that, how Fairphone does things differently? You've identified the problem. So what did you do?
Yeah, so on all these areas that I'm talking about, and obviously we also work on recycling and getting and urban mining, as they call it, right, to get minerals back. But we also acknowledge that we don't have enough minerals from recycled resources to fuel the energy, to provide minerals for the energy transition and to build the products that we need and the technology that we need. So a big part of that will come from the ground still. So what we do is we set up, for example, the Fair Cobalt Alliance, which is an alliance. We got also Tesla, Google, and these big guys on board to focus on improving the conditions in these countries, and also focusing on child labor-free mining, conflict-free mining. And that goes also for gold. We use Fairtrade Gold. We have Fairtrade Silver credits that we use in our system. I'm saying credits because it's very, a phone is not a banana or a chocolate bar. You can't say, well, we take that gold and that silver and then we trace it all the way back to the phone. We put it in the phone, and thereby we have that, that silver and gold into that phone. So our solutions are pragmatic, scalable, and looking at all these minerals. And we currently look at more than 12 minerals.
Right. So 12 of the 60 that go
exactly. So we take the most problematic ones, and we started with with coltan and cobalt and these problematic materials, because we know there's a lot of conflict connected to it. And then we do two things: we focus on the conditions under which they're mined, and on the same time, and that's the holistic view we have, we also know that mining is bad for the environment. So we use minerals that come from recycled resources. So that's on the material side. On the manufacturing side, we're the only one in the industry that offers a living wage to their workers in the factory, and that in itself is a big step. But I can tell you, just as a couple of bucks more on a phone to do that
in a factory, which presumably is in China.
Yeah,
I mean, it can't be easy, can it, to just change the culture?
No, it's very difficult.
How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so you have to be pragmatic about these things. And we've tried different things, and we've been too exotic in the things we've tried sometimes, because we also set up a fund before, and from that fund, so we put a premium in. So just to go back to the challenge we have there, is that if you start paying premiums to people in a factory, if that factory has 30,000 employees and you start paying only the people working on Fairphones a certain amount of money more, the first question is, who are the ones working on Fairphones? Is it also the janitor? Is it also, the management? Is it also, so who is it? So you need to define a group. We defined, the people working on the lines for that. You also need to ask yourself, how much envy am I going to create in a factory where they're going to, see things like, oh, but this guy's got more paid than me, and that you create unrest. So what you do is you come up with a total plan on living wage, where you also involve other customers of that factory. and ask them to also start doing living wage so that you can actually cover that whole factory. So we take an example position, so how we see it, and that's also how we see our impact, and our theory of change is very simple. We show the problems. That's our campaigning element. We started as a campaign. We really want to surface the problems that are connected to a certain area in the industry. We show that you can do things differently, like setting up living wage mechanisms, setting up the Fair Cobalt Alliance in the mines, using more recycled plastics in the phones than others do. And showing those innovations, we inspire and we actively also involve the industry into also using those kind of innovations.
Right.
And that is where the real skill is, because as a small phone company, we have the advantage to do these innovations.
Yeah.
But also, the impact is smaller if you look at our own supply chain when we get the others to join as well.
It does show the pros and cons of globalization, doesn't it? I mean, to make these products, supply chains are necessarily complex. We couldn't do them without those supply chains. So, and I remember it reminds me very much of an interview I did with Thomas Thwaites on this podcast a few years ago, where he attempted to make a toaster by hand from scratch, and he mined his own minerals. And essentially he uncovered kind of two things, really. The environmental damage that these products, everyday products, can cause, but also the fact that, as you point out, a single person can't possibly make these things. They're not craft items, are they? So are you trying to create a kind of ethical globalization or an ethical global market? Well, it's a nice way of putting it. I think it's almost on a philosophical level. And that is that I believe with creating things, we're also destroying things, right? And that is a dilemma we have as human beings. Because by being on this earth, we take and we give, we add and we take, whatever you want to see it. But it's like the world is not necessarily helped if we all commit suicide, right? You could say our footprint is a lot smaller. So by being here, you have that impact. And we balance that as human beings. And we're very well of looking at these dilemmas in the context of our own lives. When it gets to sustainability, it is about that, right? It is about the philosophical question almost. Like, how much do I take and how much do I add to this world in order to have future generations also be part of this world and survive even on this world? That thinking, I believe, has to be part of our economic system. Right now, the economic system is just, the only thing that drives the economic system is a financial ratio. And the weird thing is that economic systems, you just look back into how it got into existence, is basically social science. It's not math. We look at the economic system as a mathematical, like almost physics exercise. You just calculate stuff and then prices determine everything, and that's it. Whereas it's a social construct. It's the way we have agreed to work and to trade and everything around it. It's the question about value. So to get back to your question, what is it that we are doing? I think we're trying to achieve a way to navigate in the current economic system, because that is where a lot of the things fail, I think, in terms of the kind of utopian thoughts about how things should be. But we have a view on a more value-based economic system. And that takes a lot of compromises and small steps. And if you ask me, is Fairphone 100% fair? For sure not. We don't even pretend to be like 100% Fairphone and everything is good, because we are taking just steps towards that. And we know we will never reach 100% fair, because the question of fairness is already a philosophical question, right? Child labor was totally fine 100 years ago. Things change, so it's really on how do we see the world and how do we want to operate in that. And Fairphone is a platform to experiment, to put more human values and also to surface also the human elements of production systems which have been dehumanized. I hope you're enjoying the show. This is just to let you know that the Material Matters Fair will return to Barge House, Oxo Tower Wharf this September from Wednesday the 18th to Saturday the 21st. Keen to exhibit? Do drop me a line at hello@materialmatters.design. That's hello@materialmatters.design. Also, if your brand is looking to reach the design world, there are a plethora of sponsorship opportunities. My partner William Knight and I would be delighted to hear from you. Right, on with the episode. As you allude to, you actually started out as a campaign in 2010. You weren't necessarily going to make a phone at all.
No. it was kind of a bold statement. And you were talking about Thomas Thwaites, and to be honest, Thomas Thwaites has been the inspiration for me to do this way.
He's a very nice man as well.
Oh, it's great. You did an opening.
You're not going to try and become a goat like him, though, are you?
Yeah, no. I'm not that kind of artist, to be honest. I see myself I do see myself as an engineer, designer, artist.
Not a goat,
but not a goat. But I think it's wonderful the way he raises these kind of questions. I think the big difference between how Thomas approached it and how I want to approach this, I'm a system designer or a system artist or whatever you want to call it. I look at what is the influence we can have on the systems through what we do. And for me, a company going into that economic system made sense because the system that has most impact on our social and cultural and even like geopolitical challenges that we have and the sustainability challenge, everything that we're dealing with nowadays is connected to that one system, that economic system that is basically getting out of control. I think consumerism, if it would be a religion, we'd all be extremists at the time, right? I wanted to be part of that system. So you're talking about, we started as a campaign, but the thought was, what if we do what Thomas did, make a toaster from scratch, but really do that as part of the economic system.
Yeah. So change the system from the inside.
Yeah.
Is fundamentally what you're saying.
Exactly. And for that, we needed a company because you can't just sit from the sideline and say how things need to be done as a company if you're not a company. That's how we approached it.
So was there a realization, Bas? You tell an anecdote about your son's Nintendo DS.
Yeah.
And how you couldn't repair it, which is very neat. But at the same time, I think your friend Peter van der Mark asked you to work on the campaign for Netherlands Institute for Southern Africa for conflict minerals. So the professional and the personal kind of entwined at that moment?
No, it's but I think professional and personal, I've always been intertwined for me in terms like that. Like the personal was, I love opening up stuff and looking inside it and just asking the question, why are things made the way they are made? And not necessarily from a what's wrong about it? Why do they do this to me? Or, sometimes I do get agitated, like with the Nintendo. My son broke his Nintendo, was crying, and I wanted to fix it, but I was, I had the wrong screwdriver, so I messed up the screws. And there's no way to be able to open it anymore if you mess up the screws. People who use screws know that. But so I had to break it open to be able to fix it. And I just, for me, that was kind of a...
God, your son must have been apoplectic as you were breaking his Nintendo DS.
Oh, he was just, it was horror because we were going on holiday and the whole car was full of, packed. And he came to me with his broken Nintendo crying, and I thought, oh shit, there goes my piece in the car, right? So I was really pissed about the whole situation. I couldn't fix it at that time. And I knew I could fix it because I knew there was a loose connector somewhere. So that agitation also, I think, is more of it's symbolic for something I feel very closely to myself, and that is a quote that has been coined by the maker movement at the time, and that is, if you can't open it, you don't own it. And I think, for me, one of the important things in that is that it's about, it also says something about our relationship with technology and products in general. That it also says something about the passive role that we have taken as consumers and the passive role we've been given by the industry as consumers also with our products. And I believe, how can you have people take responsibility over the products that they use? How can you expect people to take responsibility if they don't have any connection or active role or even relationship with what's happening to make those products? And that Nintendo was symbolic for me. And that is because of, and you go back to professional context, I've been working on open hardware and open source. And as you said, well, I was at that time writing the book, also Open Design Now.
You had an open source restaurant in Amsterdam, I think.
Yeah, with a friend of mine, friend artist Arne Hendricks, and we downloaded the whole restaurant from the internet to find out what people would do.
So you have to take another step through.
Yeah, side note, right?
How does an open source restaurant work?
Well, we were playing around with the thought, what happens with all this stuff that people put online? And this was Instructables came up and all these maker movements. And this is, you have to imagine, this is like 20 years ago. Yeah, I think 20 years ago. No, 20 years ago. And this was at the moment that everybody started sharing like anything, like how to make this, how to do that, how to solve that, the recipes. And we just went to a website called instructables.com and we looked at each other and said, what if we open a restaurant by just downloading all this shit from people and then tell them that we've downloaded all this stuff and see how they respond to the fact that we are going to commercialize, make money with that restaurant and serving food that they came up with, because we wanted, we were experimenting with what happens in the digital, the communities that were shaped and the real.
How did they respond?
It was quite funny. We did cake contests with people from Australia and China and I think Chile. Women that put there was one guy there as well. I think that they put their recipes online and we just started doing contests without them knowing it. But we opened up the comment box in the restaurant so that people could comment on their cakes, and they got like hundreds and hundreds of comments on the cake, like, "Oh, fantastic this and that." And they didn't know what was happening to them, but it was people loved it. We even got like Hilton at a certain point asking us, is this something we can invest in, and can we scale it to a larger experiment? It was also a thought-provoking experiment and not something for the real world yet. And I think with Fairphone, when that came, the question from Peter, and it was doing all these kinds of things.
So you'd done all this, but you'd no experience, by your own admission, you'd no experience of running a company or making a phone. You had this completely blank slate. I mean, you started up with a crowdfunding campaign, but I think I'm right in saying you didn't actually use a crowdfunding site. So why not?
With Fairphone, we already were running it as a campaign for 2 years, raising awareness, having this crazy half kind of idea of making a phone and having the same thinking as with the open source communities, open hardware communities, to involve people to make that phone. It was more set up as a platform for people to add ideas and to look at how, what we could do to make that phone. And the first ideas about repairable phones and these kind of stuff came up. But we didn't really... we were looking at how do we make this sustainable in terms of economically sustainable, and we were thinking about a certification or a non-profit organization that would help companies doing that. And then we just thought, but wait a minute, I think the craziest idea would be to do it ourselves. And we already in that time opened up a website where we asked people if we'd be making this product, would you be interested in it? And we already had like 20,000 people saying, well, if the Fairphone would be here, we'd be interested in it.
Right. So you knew there was a potential market.
We knew there was a potential, but it was important for us because everybody we walked, we told that we were going to do this. Even like the big operators, they told you're crazy. It's very difficult to make a phone. And it's a saturated market. There's like when it took all already, it's like a very, very mature market. And nobody cares about a sustainable phone anyway. And we had the proof that was the case. So we thought, well, let's be strategically naive, I call it, and let's just start. Let's make a phone. We got somebody so crazy enough to invest a couple of $100,000 to, especially connected to the foundation I was working at the time, Back Society. There were people there who really wanted to see if we could pull this off. But we needed millions. We needed millions to start production. So that's why we said, okay, let's find a factory in China who has a phone already. Well, let's do some stuff in the supply chain, change working conditions, the minerals, but let's not mess around with the product itself. It's an existing phone. And that existing phone is going to be marketed as the Fairphone.
Because you raised, with that crowdfunding, which you didn't launch on a crowdfunding site, which I'm still intrigued by, but you raised 7 million euros. Yeah, no, you knew that you had an audience who were interested, but that still must have come as a bit of a shock.
It was a huge shock. I was, we just put a button on the website, and we knew there was some interest already, but within 2 months, we sold all 25,000 phones that we were going to produce. And the crazy thing is even the non-existing phones were being traded on eBay for double the price because we said we're not going to take any orders anymore because we need to go into production. But I can tell you, I mean, at that moment, I was looking at the bank account. Never made a phone before. I never ran a company before. We were like at the time 6 people. We didn't really know what we were doing. I was really lying in bed with tears in my eyes. Like, I'm going to, I told my partner at the time, I'm going to pay back everybody their money.
Because you didn't think you could do it?
No, it was it was really scary when you're a designer and all of a sudden you're running a company and having millions and millions of money on your bank account. And she convinced me that it was a good idea to move forward. So I was about to blow the whole thing up.
Did you need a lot of convincing?
I did. I mean, you want to have people around you that support you on that moment when you feel really scared about taking those steps, right? Yeah, I know. The next day I was sitting on my in my bedroom with my laptop on my lap. And I had to transfer like €1 million to the Chinese factory to start producing. And I had everything set up, and I was sweating to push that button to transfer the money. And then I transferred. I pushed the button finally to transfer the money. My kids were playing downstairs, and it was like really weird situation. But on a Sunday, I know it. And then I transferred money and said, "You cannot transfer $1 million at once." So we didn't have like a super professional bank account even and everything. So I had to send the money in batches to the factory in China, but batch 250,000, 1 or 4, 2 or 4, 3 or 4, 4 or 4, and so it was very, very amateuristic in a way, but it was also fantastic because we were flying. It was like all of a sudden we were able to put together a team from the moment that we really took that step, and it's not just me. It's like a couple of people that really believed in this, and we said we're going to do it. Within 1.5 years, we sold 60,000 phones. We had 16 million turnover. We were a profitable company. We had 40, 50 people working at Fairphone at that time. And that was within 1.5 years.
Which is extraordinary. That first phone, it was an existing phone that was being made in a factory in China. You concentrated on their working practices and the minerals that you could control. You have described it as a shitty phone.
It was. Yeah, no, it was.
and as we've discovered, you weren't actually using it as a phone yourself. So, I mean, I guess why was it a shitty phone?
Well, it was the first phone that we launched. And even though it was an existing phone and we thought it was a solid phone, everything was working well, we had a lot of problems with the software and making sure that it was integrated with the Google services. We had, I can tell you, Google was not happy with us launching the phone with Google services on it. So we made a button on it that you could download very easily all the Google services, which even shipping the phones, just looking back at what happened is that we took all the emails addresses which had google.com behind it. We put them, we shipped those at last because we were afraid that they were going to, stop the whole operation. There were errors with the phones at a certain point that if you were calling another Deutsche Telekom Fairphone on that network, that you only heard like Deutsche Telekom helped us to solve that at the last moment. It is an extremely complex product. And what we, I think, at the time didn't see is that even though the product was ready and was already there and was produced, it never hit a European market where all the conditions and the requirements of operators and all the way that whole infrastructure works. Yeah, you have to tweak the phone specifically for those networks.
Was there a danger you could have wrecked the whole idea with a poorly executed product?
Yeah, it was super tough because you launch Fairphone, like a fair product, and then your customer support is being blown away by all kinds of problems that the product has. You get desperate because you think like this is not. You feel guilty also towards your customers, right? Because it was a crowdfunding campaign. It was all it was friends and families, and people came to me as well. Like Bas, it's a great idea, but I can't use the phone. And we put so much effort into solving those issues. But if at a certain point, if you also setting up a company where at that time the fastest growing technology startup of Europe, it comes also with all kinds of challenges. Yeah, you drown in everything that's coming at you. And I described it before as, you're going up with a plane and you're flying. You're still building the plane, but you also don't know how to fly. It's a very difficult situation because any decision you make, you might just crash. And if you crash, you also let all these people down because on the other hand, we were being put on a pedestal as well by the sustainability industry. Like, wow, look at this. There's somebody is doing something finally. Greenpeace awarded us being the greenest consumer electronics company in the world. above Apple and HP and all these big guys. So there was also a huge expectation of what we were doing, and at the same time, you still need to get that product under control, and that's why we invested a lot in Fairphone 2, in the next product.
Yes, which I think I'm right in saying was designed by Seymour Powell. So you bought the design in-house, and was that the first modular?
Yeah, so that was the first modular. So the first phone was really focused on what I said, more the social fairness elements, and the repairability was not there yet, but it was a thought that we had, because we couldn't make it's millions and millions of investment to design a phone, and we didn't want to use that money for launching the first phone to. We didn't have the money. We didn't want to have any venture capital, and giving away a lot of the company. And to be honest, I don't think any venture capital would have invested in the company. But it was also a deliberate choice to do it through crowdfunding and keep it with the community. But yeah, for the next model, one of the things we saw is that one of the more important elements on sustainability is the ability to change your screen easily, to replace components easily. And so that is where we got Seymour Powell in and some other design companies that helped us really design a phone from scratch, which was groundbreaking, because the whole phone was set up in a way that was designed from the inside out, instead of where normally you say these are the requirements, it needs to be so thin, this color material feel to it, and then the engineers have to cram everything inside that little box. But we said no, we wanted to start with a screen you can take off without using any screws, which in retrospect was a bad idea.
Well, you have described it as being too ambitious, and I'm wondering...
It was too ambitious, yeah, because you don't... Well, we wanted the phone to be like super repairable, like I could do it on stage with one hand, right? So I could take off the screen. Just looking back, I think who needs that, right? So with Fairphone 3, we saw the problems also that arose with the ambition that we had with Fairphone 2, which is like a super modular, extremely modular, easy to repair phone. But because of that, also expensive to make with all the connections. So that is more on the cost side, but also fragile. And that is a paradox, right? So you make a phone that should be durable, longevity, and then you have a fragile phone because of the complex design of it and the connectors that connect all these modules. So we had to go back to the drawing table for Fairphone 3. Fairphone 2 is definitely the most modular, repairable phone that we made, but who needs that if you only need to change your screen like one or twice in the whole lifetime of your phone? So that's when we actually said, well, let's use screws again for the screen and use a flat cable to connect the phone instead of having like very exotic, patented even connectors that we developed. Fairphone 2 was a huge step, but it defined the DNA basically of our repairable phones. So it was really useful, but again, it was not the phone that brought skill and trust also in terms of the product to our customers, for the reason that we also saw the downside of some of the design decisions we made.
You're up to Fairphone 5 now.
Yeah, so we've learned a lot along the way.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've learned is that that you run a business also, right? You really your ambitions on both the product side and on the sustainability side need to be in line with the growth that you can handle as a company. There are a lot of compromises that you need to make when you're in a certain system that operates in a certain way, like the economic system or financial system, whatever you want to call it, and also the industry. Like you want to have, there's all kinds of compromises on the phone. If you say, well, it's a bit thicker because you can change the battery. The battery, for example, is a bit smaller than other phones, so it lasts a bit less, the Fairphone 5 battery, because it's replaceable. Right. So these are like these are all kind of design. So you're always having these kind of compromises where the paradigm for us is different. It's like designing from the inside out to repair it. Making a waterproof, repairable phone is really a challenge. This one is quite has a good rating on not letting water in, but you can't toss it in the water and then leave it there for an hour and get it back, and it still works probably. Right, but some of the other phones that are not as repairable, they it's easier to make them in a way that they're really waterproof. So these kind of things we've learned along the way, like where do we find that balance, that we make a product that the consumer the customer really likes, also is used to from an aesthetical point of view. And on the other hand, also keep the values and our design principles at the core of the product. And I think that we found, like in Fairphone 4 already, but also in Fairphone 5, we really found that sweet spot.
So I was going to say 4 and 5 are the sweet spot.
Yeah, you see the reviews are good. Like with 3, the reviews also on a quality level were good, but the price was still too, it was too steep compared to other models. And you see more and more we with Fairphone, we are able to get to a competitive price point, especially when you take into account that the cost of ownership, as they call it, the longer you use your phone, the less phones you have to buy as well, right? So it's also, if you look at how long you can use the phone, and we do take pride in that we not only make the phone repairable so you can change parts easily and offer these repairs at a low price point, but the parts, but also that we support the phone for 5+ years, right? In terms of software support and everything from Fairphone 4 on.
So it sounds as if there have been some significant bumps and learnings, I guess you'd say, along the route. It sounds, Bas, and I hope you don't mind me asking you about this, but it sounds as if you had what can only be described as a nervous breakdown at one point. Mm-hmm. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Oh, yeah, I was having panic attacks for a while already, and at a certain point, my partner at the time had to. She took me to the crisis center of the mental health clinic to because I was just lost. That was, with some medication to sleep, I got back on my feet again. But after I did an investment round, got money into the company, I had to get out of the company for a couple of months. And it is really, it's a super tough journey when you go into something like this and you see, the expectations go higher and higher and higher. The damage also that can happen when you don't succeed, and that might be just in your head, but that's how it feels. The damage that you do also in terms of it's not possible to make sustainable phones, blah blah blah. It gets bigger and bigger if you feel as a company, and also the stakeholders and all the responsibility, everything just gets bigger and bigger. And I think for me, there was a wake-up call at a certain point, like, oh, wait a minute. I need to take a bit more distance from the company, because I became also the company. And I think being an artist really helped there. I was able to or having the artistic view on things helped there. I was able to take a step back and look at Fairphone and say, like, wait a minute. As an entrepreneur, you can fail, right? Your company can fail, and as much as people say, well, failing is learning, blah blah blah. Sure, but it feels like failing. I can tell you, if your company is at the verge of bankruptcy. But if you just look from a distance and see, when we started the campaign and the amount of, the journey itself and what we learned from it, and also me personally, what I've learned from it. If you look at that as kind of an art project, like Thomas Thwaites and the toaster, and finding out how the world works. No, but seriously, for me, it was like looking at the whole thing and even the company as like, I learned how it is to be dictated by the system that you're trying to change. That is what's happening. That's why I cracked, right? And it's like this guy going on a journey to change the system, and it's like this Don Quixote kind of image I got. Like I'm being put down on my knees by that same financial system, because I broke down because of financial problems with the company all the time. And just being able to take a step back and look at it that way, I also found it quite insightful. And I thought, the great thing about art is that it's it's an individual expression that can't fail.
Are there things that you would have done differently in hindsight?
Oh yeah, sure. I've learned a lot. I think on a personal level, I would have done it more, like even on a board level. I'm not saying that we that I did it alone, because I didn't. There was a lot of people involved, but I felt very alone at the CEO level for as being the only board member, the only formal responsible person for since the start of Fairphone. Financially, I would have, I would have done things differently, like get more investment into the company, create more breadth to grow and focus on mid-long term instead of being cash managing all the time. And I think I've took those things also to the new company, the Clique, and we set up the company with 3 people in the board. And I was CFO.
I was going to say, yes, you were dealing with the finance.
Yeah, I was doing the finance for the company because I really wanted to be, not that I love the finance, but I do like the financial elements of the logic behind it, and I wanted to be on top of that. I learned also that if you know how to plan that, then you can allow yourself to make to also plan your impact really well and your ambitions. Your ambitions and your financial position go hand in hand. And if you're able to plan that well, connected to together, like this is when I make impact. This is when I make more, a step towards, other stuff I want to do on sustainability or social elements, or whatever. It gives more space also in your mind, and you don't have to do everything at once.
And Clique is going back to your restaurant moment.
You're
dealing with restaurant food waste, right?
Yeah, it's with food waste. Yeah. We collect food residues. We don't call it waste in that sense, but it's like cutting the kitchen leftovers and peels and stuff, and coffee. So we collect that all. Normally goes to the incinerator. We were talking about it, like recycling is stupid. Well, here it is also very stupid. People put it on one big pile. They send it to the incinerator and get some energy out of it. But all the nutrition, everything that's in that food is gone. And we grew that on the land, and we just burn it. So we collect it. We make compost out of it, we get oil from the peels. We grow mushrooms on the coffee residues, and then from that, products are grown, and oil is used for other products, and we sell those products back to the restaurant. So they basically have food. By going to a restaurant, you're also producing food. That's how we see it.
Yeah, no, really interesting. I mean, the pandemic, when restaurants were forced to close, must have been quite tricky for you, I'm guessing.
Yeah, there was shit. Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it was very. In that period, we had to close down the business, basically, put it on hibernation mode, but we survived.
Yeah, good. Fairphone's been going 11 years now, 10, 11 years. Can you point to changes in the system that Fairphone has helped bring by this time?
Oh yeah, sure. I think you can't pinpoint literally like this is what we've done and that's what happened because of the way we operate, right? I can on certain areas, like for example the Fair Cobalt Alliance, getting these big guys on board, making sure that it gets on the agenda also. But what we do is we push for laws that also facilitate this change, right? So we always work on different levels. Like I said, we campaign, we show what's happening, we show the innovations. Like on repairability, we've been very soon showing that repairability is the way forward to extend the lifetime of a phone, right? Even a replaceable battery to start with. And one of the things I remember is I've sent a letter also to EU Commissioner, like, can you please put the design, they were setting up an eco-design directive for household products. And I said, can you please put phones in there as well to make them part of that eco-design directive? So at least they need to be repairable items and easily accessible batteries and these kind of things. And yeah, to my surprise, it's the EU, so it took a bit of time. But in the end, almost 10 years later, 8 years later, the law is in place now that in the future all phones need to have easily repairable batteries. And that is, I'm not saying that it's just my letter or it's just Fairphone, but we've been part of that lobby. And I see that being a company and being part of moving the needle on all those levels, it's the impact of that is huge, and even the awareness around production, the awareness. I really see also that in the last 10 years, the conversation about the whole supply chain of electronics has changed, and I do believe that we have had a huge role in making that supply chain and that value chain behind the scenes more visible.
I mean, we need to, right? Because, I mean, we're digging more and more of these minerals out of the earth.
Exactly.
The Guardian published a piece looking at some unpublished so far UN analysis that suggests that global extraction of raw materials is expected to increase by 60% by 2060.
Right? Yeah, they're talking about deep sea mining for God's sake, right? It's really ridiculous. And I think the big question we have to ask ourselves is, and I don't see that in the industry yet, but I hope we will get there, is do we need to produce all this stuff? Right? Because you can put on a paper like the economy needs 60% more of these minerals, blah, 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 because we need growth. But it's very, very difficult to have a conversation with the industry about, like, listen, guys, how can we take responsibility in producing less? And every bit, every atom that we use on technology needs infrastructure. Data, all this stuff needs to be built. So even the data we use as consumers, customers, and we store, and we think it's all endless. It's not. It all uses minerals. So we have to also ask ourselves, how much of this stuff do we really want to keep producing, and do we need to do that in this amount? And I think if we ask ourselves that question as well, we look at things in a different way. And I think also, I think a very important element of that is that we need to reestablish basically a more healthy relationship with the products we use.
Talking about other business models, Fairphone has started a kind of rental model, which for people my age, which is 50 something, I remember when our first video was rented, our TV was rented. This is going back to the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. I mean, we're experimenting with it because of that reason, because we have to ask ourselves, and we're also looking, is this something for the consumer market? Is the customer, the bigger audience, or is this more for businesses interested? But yeah, I think, one of the challenges that we take ourselves on is like, okay, so if we are going to align our business model with our mission, then it makes sense to have people, to rent out our products, basically, have a Fairphone as a service, we call it, because that we're intrinsically motivated to have you keep that phone as long as possible, because it costs us money if we have to make a new phone for you. So it's just also experimenting, but the big question is, do people want that?
Yeah, I'm wondering, is this getting away from self-repair? Do they send it to you to be repaired in that case? Yeah,
so there are some nuts to crack there, obviously, right? So the self-repair is still important because I think even the logistical movements and everything, it's just easier to send you a new part and you replace it yourself. So it does still it still has all these components in there. But it also opens up a really nice opportunity for new thinking. For example, we can offer people lower repair rates for their screens, like not repair, but like lower part rates for the screens, for example, if they don't break the screen for a long time. So if you can show that if you use your phone and if you took care of your phone and didn't break it for a long time, we can offer you a screen for less, and that incentivizes people. So it's really on the repair. We can also create incentives to even be more caring towards that product.
Yeah, very good. Bas, our time is essentially up. I've taken loads of your day up. Thank you so much. Final question. What's next for Fairphone? What's next for you?
Oh, that's a big question.
That's how I like to end it.
No, I got it. No, so what's big? I mean, for Fairphone, it's quite easy in that sense that we've come at a point that we are able to. We have a great product. You see the reviews. Getting really good reviews, and it's a product that is ready for a bigger audience. So for us, really reaching that bigger audience is also going to make more impact throughout the whole supply chain. So that is the next step that that is a step that we're working on right now. Really, scaling the company and scaling our customer base in order to make more impact and in that supply chain and on the industry as a whole. For myself, I love what I'm doing at the moment, and it's more of a a role more in the background. I do that with the Clique. I do it with Fairphone. I love telling the story on stage. So I do. As you started with, I'm scared to be on stage. Well, I can tell you,
yourself. You like scaring yourself.
I love doing that, and it's I do that with a lot of pleasure. So I see that just telling about what we've experienced and what we've learned is also valuable for others, and I don't do that just on big stages, but also helping companies on a board level, also to think about what it means to have sustainability as a decision-making factor in the company. And I think that's what at Fairphone, the most valuable thing I've always seen is that with every decision we make, and we always try to embrace that dilemma of sustainability, that with everything you're creating, you're also destroying. And then the decision can still be the same, but as long as you have that conversation in your organization, I think that's the most valuable step we can make.
Very good. Very good. Well, it's been a complete joy to talk, Bas. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you too.
If you're interested in purchasing a Fairphone following this podcast, then there's a link in the show notes. Feel completely free to use it. Or as Bas says, hang on to your existing phone for a little longer. It's up to you. As ever, to find other podcasts that I've done and to sign up to our newsletter, go to materialmatters.design. And there are images relating to the interviews on our Instagram page, which is also materialmatters.design. And it would make me incredibly happy if you went to my Patreon page and made a pledge at patreon.com/materialmatters. For as little as £2.50 a month, you can receive invites to various Material Matters events, as well as getting access to each episode before it's published to the wider world. Material Matters is a completely independent concern, and any help you can offer would be hugely appreciated. Ultimately, you'll be helping to take the message, the importance of materials, skill, craft and design to a whole new audience. Right, I'll be taking a short break from the podcast, letting my voice recover, but I'll be back in April with an array of fascinating guests. See you then, and thanks very much for listening.